wait for a couple of minutes more and then we will start. And I am Dr. Angshuman Mukherjee, the host for the session. Will be chairing the session, of course, and let others join, and then we will begin it. Okay. Oh, by the way, am I audible? The visibility is, of course, was clear because I could see myself. I'm audible, probably, right?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes, sir,
Okay.
you're audible.
So we have 10 speakers, probably, if I'm not mistaken, or probably 11, because Nilanjan told me that one speaker is to join my session. Uh, Let me just see. Mr. Faraz Subba is not there as yet. Anyways, probably we will start and after that we will join. Uh, right, so we will not delay with the usual or conventional greetings anymore. Um, we have 10 speakers or maybe 11. Uh, as I have been told that I should be giving you 10 minutes each to present your paper, right? And if you have any questions or queries regarding the, the papers of your fellow presenters, we may discuss it at the end of the session if time permits. And this is the sixth session of day 2 of this program. And we all know, fortunately, unfortunately, violence is ubiquitous in today's world. Several discourses have come into existence and around this idea of violence. My own work, my own PhD, and eventually I'm planning to, you know, turn it into my first monograph, is on the aesthetics of violence in Edward Bond's plays. So I am more or less familiar with the dimensions of the concept, and I hope to be enlightened more after the session. So let's begin straight away. And our first speaker is Mr. Amitabh Pal, who is an assistant professor of East Calcutta Girls College. I hope you are there. And just let me tell you, I began my career working there as a guest lecturer, East Calcutta Girls College, because you know mm, that was immediately after the results of my MA were published, and uh, like I also cracked Nate and said, and I was waiting for the CSC interview, and that was the time for a few months or almost for a year actually till the placement. Okay, I worked there as a guest faculty. So, Amitabh, please begin straight away.
Yes. So, good morning, sir, and good morning, everyone. And I express my gratitude to Panchla Mohabidyalaya for organizing this thought-provoking conference. And it is also quite interesting to know that Angshuman sir also was a part of our college for a brief while. I'm sharing my screen. I hope my screen is visible. Uh, please, can you please confirm whether my screen is visible?
Yes, it is visible. A little bit of, yeah, it's perfectly visible.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. So, today the topic of my discussion is exploring the tangled psychology of reluctant murderers in honor killing, a reading of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's novella, Chronicle of a Death Foretold. Now, what is honor killing or what is the concept of honor? So, in most societies, the chastity of the woman in marriage remains an area of obsession. And a typical patriarchal society usually demands the chastity of the woman in marriage. And for some reason, if that fails, then the so called question of honor of the woman's entire family seems jeopardized. And one way of compensating the so called loss of honor is to kill the man or lover who is supposedly responsible for the woman's loss of chastity. Now, of course, Marquez's novella is set in the context of the Latin American society. However, we as Indians will find the topic or the issues which Marquez discusses quite relevant to our society as well. Now, this is rather a problematic area of silence because there are numerous literary works across the world which deal with relationships and marriage, both failed marriages and successful marriages. But the sexual relation between husband and wife remains an area of silence in most literary works. Even if we think of English literature directly, so apart from probably Harry's Harry's some novels by Harry, so there are few novels, particularly in the 18th century or the 19th century, which directly deal with the topic. Now, coming back to Marquez, in this novella, the virginity of the woman comes to the foreground in the context of the wedding between Angela Vicario and Bayardo San Roman. Of course, Angela is the heroine of the novella, and her name is rather ironic because there is angel in her novel. Sorry, there is angel in her name, but as the novel unfolds, we find that what happens to her is anything, anything but angelic. And in the novel, unfortunately, just after the wedding or immediately after the wedding, even before the bishop can set his foot to preside over the final moment, Bayardo returns Angela to her mother's house. And that actually triggers the entire chain of events, which today in our parlance we might well call honor killing. Now, the other interesting point is that in this novella, it is the Vicario brothers, that is the two brothers of Angela, who are named Pablo Vicario and Pedro Vicario, they now get the responsibility of committing the murder and thereby redeeming the so called honor of the family. And it is remarkable to note that this novella actually dwells on an event which actually happened in the 1950s. Although Marquez published this novella in 1981, this novella is written in a journalistic mode, and this novel takes a look at an event which happened in the 1950s. So, this episode that Marquez discusses in this novella was quite authentic. Now, the other interesting point is that in this honor killing process, who takes the initiative? And it is Angela's mother, that is the bride's mother, who first becomes furious when Bayardo returns Angela to her mother's house. So, here the woman figure actually participates in the patriarchal values which promote honor killing. So Angela's mother is named Pura Vicario, and she demonstrates this female initiative for meting out patriarchal justice. So she becomes an instrument of oppression by subscribing to oppressive ideologies. And only Pura, so I quote a few lines from the novella. Only Pura Vicario knew what she did during the next 2 hours. Now, these 2 hours, of course, unfold after Bayardo returns Angela to her mother's house on the night of wedding because of lack of Angela's virginity. And Angela, on her part, later recounts and I quote, "The only thing I could remember is that she was holding me by the hair with one hand and beating me." So, of course, this violence within the domestic space that begins, and here it begins thanks to Pura Vicario, who is Angela's mother. Now, the crux of the presentation or the crux of my PPT presentation, of course, is the point that here the responsibility of killing the lover who was supposedly responsible for Angela's loss of virginity, that falls on the two brothers, Pablo and Pedro. But what is ironic is that when the marriage between Angela and Bayardo was fixed, then Pablo and Pedro were not concerned, were not consulted. So they were not in the picture when the marriage between Angela and Bayardo was fixed. So it was the senior members and elderly figures in the household who fixed that marriage. But the moment that that marriage fails because of so-called loss of honor, so then it becomes the responsibility of Pablo and Pedro to redeem that honor. So in this novella, Pablo and Pedro, they are the murderers, all right, but they are also a victim in a way because they never were part of the process. It is only after the marriage fails or the wedding breaks down, then they become the responsible figure for redeeming their sister's honor. So, although we are here talking about patriarchy, so it is not so straightforward. So, because here it is the two male figures, they are also in a way reluctant perpetrators, and that is the primary thrust of my presentation. So, the psychology of reluctant perpetrators. So, here they are the perpetrators, but from the other perspective, they are also victims because they were never party to this decision. Now, the larger point that Marquez, of course, makes, and which is also relevant to us as Indians, is the culpability of the entire society. Now, when the direct responsibility of the murder falls on Pablo and Pedro, what they do is that they dilly-dally. So they talk about their plans to the mayor, they talk about their plan to the police, and even when they go to a shop to sharpen their weapon, there also he talks about their plan of killing Santiago, who was supposedly responsible or who was supposedly the culprit, and they talk about their plan in detail. Now, why did they do that? Normally, murderers keep their plan of murder secret. But in this case, because Pablo and Pedro, they were reluctant murderers, they actually revealed their plan in details to each and everyone they met, and they could possibly talk. Now, they hoped that probably the mayor or maybe the police or maybe someone else will forbid them to commit the crime. But unfortunately, nobody stopped them from committing the crime, or nobody told them, do not please commit the crime. In fact, when Pablo approached his fiancée, so his fiancée actually told him that unless you commit this crime, I will not marry you. Or to put it the other way, if you commit this crime, I'll be proud of you. So that is the approach of the society, and this is where markets drives from the point that they talk to everyone else with the hope that they will be stopped, but unfortunately they were never stopped, and thus the culpability of the crime actually falls on the entire society. Although Pablo and Pedro, they become the direct criminals, or they become the direct participants in the crime, the entire society actually stokes this crime. Now, in this context, the question of free will versus societal pressure also comes in. So, this novel also some kind of existential tinge. So, here the existential question is raised not in any abstract philosophical context, but in the context of society. So, when the social pressure is so severe, or the societal pressure is so severe, does free will really exist for Pablo and Pedro? So, Marquez's novella also throws up that question. Now, the other interesting point is the veracity of the accusation. So, when Angela was asked on the night of the wedding who was culprit or who was her lover who was responsible for a loss of virginity, and at that point, Angela named Santiago Nasser to be the culprit. Now, this is quite interesting that throughout the novella, till the point Santiago is murdered, he actually wanders freely and he is very carefree and relaxed. In fact, he also participated in the wedding celebration. So now the question remains whether Santiago was indeed the person who was responsible for the loss of Angela's virginity. In fact, it is hinted, although it is not specified, but it is hinted in the novel that probably Angela wanted to protect her actual lover, because Angela also could anticipate that the person whom she will name to be the culprit, So there is a high chance that her family will take this revenge. So there is every possibility that Angela did not name her actual lover because she wanted to protect her actual lover. So in a way, Santiago becomes victim. In fact, it is said in the novel that Santiago even could not understand his death when he was killed. Now, in this context, the other point comes in: why is it that Angela named Santiago? She could have named someone else also. So, if Santiago was not really her lover or was not really the culprit, then why did Angela name Santiago? The point is that this novel is set in the Colombian society, and Santiago belongs to the Arab group. So, Santiago's father had migrated from the Arab country, while the Colombian people, they're of course Spanish. So so the racial tension also comes in because it is an Arab, it is Santiago. So probably Angela thought that if she names an Arab, then the tension will become so high. Probably no one will have the patience or the time to verify the veracity of the culprit. And finally the other point is that what is the impact on Angela and Bardo's relation? Because remember that Bardo returned Angela at the heat of the moment on the night of the wedding, and it might well be that later there could have been some kind of a patch up. Maybe. In fact, the novel suggests that even after the crime, Angela and Bardo they were in touch. But because the honor killing was committed, because the entire episode became known to the entire town, so any possibility of patch up between Angela and Bardo, that also was also ruined permanently. And so I will end my presentation with this conclusion. So thus the novella puts to question the acceptability of the practice of code of honor, and the novella offers an understanding of how outmoded cultural values continue to dominate society. And I'm almost reminded of the title Crime and Punishment, because here it is quite confounded who actually committed the crime and who received the punishment. Because to stick to the conventional social morality, it is Angela who committed the crime and got the punishment. If we look at the other way, it is Pablo and Pedro, the two murderers who had to commit a crime and thereby received the punishment. And as for Santiago, probably he never committed the crime, but still he got the punishment. And as for Bayard, though, he returned Angela at the heat of the moment and continued to receive punishment throughout his life. So it on my part. I thank everyone present in
Thank you.
this morning for your participation and patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Amitavo. Uh, Very nicely presented and a very crisp one. I was just about to remind you of the time, but then we reached the conclusion, and it was it was quite an interestingly presented paper. Let's see whether we think of any particular issue to talk about at the end of the session. We might eventually come back to you to clarify certain points. If we don't have time, we won't. Otherwise, we may. Uh, our second speaker this morning is Suropriyo Chakraborty, who is an independent research scholar uh, from Sister Nivedita or
Sir, I'm
associate.
a registered research scholar, sir.
You are okay.
Yes.
So whatever is written there, I am actually reading that part. So I have not been briefed about it, but you are associated with Sister Nivedita University, right?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, please begin your paper.
Thank you so much to the organizers. Thank you to sir for allowing me to present this paper at this esteemed conference. My paper is titled "From Margins to Memory: Examining Othering and Social Trauma in Surviving in My World, Growing Up Dalit in Bengal" by Monohar Mouli Bishwas. Now, before delving deep into the topic, I want to make people know about Bengali Dalit literature and its regional distinctiveness. So, Bengali Dalit literature, as exemplified by Bishas's work, Manohar Mouli Bishas's work, exhibits several distinctive characteristics that differentiate it from Dalit literary traditions in other regions of India. While Marathi Dalit literature, pioneered by figures like Baburao Bagul and later theorized by Sharan Kumar Limbale, emerged from a context of organized political movement and Buddhist conversion. Bengali Dalit literature developed within a different socio-political landscape. The Bengal Renaissance, with its emphasis on social reform and cultural nationalism, created a unique context where Dalit voices had to negotiate not only with traditional caste hierarchies but also with a progressive literary establishment that often claimed to represent universal human values while remaining blind to caste based exclusions. Unlike the militant tone that the characteristics much of Marathi and Gujarati Dalit literature had, Bengali Dalit writings often adopt what might be termed as a testimonial approach, focusing on detailed documentation of lived experience rather than explicit political manifestos. The difference can be attributed to a historical context of Bengal, where the trauma of partition created a discourse of universal suffering that sometimes obscured the specific nature of caste based oppression. Now, the linguistic landscape of Bengali literature also presents unique challenges and opportunities, where the writers in the regions could draw upon established literary traditions in their respective languages. Bengali Dalit writers had to contend with a highly standardized and Sanskritized literary Bengali that was largely controlled by upper caste literary establishments, um, as um, Jaideep Sarangi in his editorial work uh, has been instrumental in bringing marginalized narratives to the forefront of literary discourse. He's, apart from him, Sharan Kumar Limbale has argued in towards an aesthetic in Dalit literature that Dalit literature serves as both testimony and resistance, challenging dominant narratives while asserting the centrality of lived experience. Now, there is a double burden where we can see the caste and partition co-aligning, where Vishwas's memoir or this writing powerfully illustrates what can be termed the double burden experienced by the Bengali Dalits, the convergence of systematic caste-based distinction with a traumatic displacement caused by partition of India in 1947. The author's evocative description of his community's island like isolation becomes a central metaphor for understanding how historical forces have compounded the marginalization of Dalit communities in Bengal. Unlike the more established Dalit literary traditions from Maharashtra, which primarily focused on caste based oppression within stable geographical boundaries, Bengali Dalit narratives like Manohar Mauli Vishwas's Surviving in My World must grapple with the additional layer of displacement and refugee identity that fundamentally altered the social fabric of Bengal. The memoir documents how the partition created new forms of vulnerability for the Namoshudra community who found themselves not only battling traditional caste hierarchies but also navigating the precarious position of being religious minorities in a newly divided subcontinent. Now, there is the process of othering and systemic violence that I'm going to talk about. So, the writings' ethnographic richness lies in its meticulous documentation of both overt and covert forms of violence that reproduce caste hierarchies in everyday life. Manohar Moli Vishwas's account demonstrates how processes of othering operate through multiple mechanisms, from the denial of basic facilities such as access to clean water and educational institutions to more subtle forms of psychological violence that internalize inferiority and enforce silence. The author's childhood experiences in school, where he was made to sit separately and was routinely humiliated by teachers and classmates, exemplify what Limbale had identified as the aesthetics of pain. The book also reveals how dominant Bengali society maintains to its hegemonic position through what Manohar Moli Vishwas calls inhuman superficiality, a performative liberalism that pays lip service to equality while perpetuating exclusionary practices. The author's encounters with well-meaning but ultimately condescending Bhadralok figures illustrate how paternalistic attitudes serve to reinforce rather than challenge existing power structures. Now, I'll be talking about the um, the recurrent theme or the recurrent image of the water hyacinth, which is very poignant in this writing. So, among various environmental symbols woven through the memoir, the water hyacinth functions as a water hyacinth is a, as you all know, a plant that grows on water. It's called kochuri pana. It's written. It was previously written in Bengali. Amar Bhuvane Ami Beche Thaki. It was later on translated by Jaideep Sarangi into English. So the water hyacinth functions as a particularly potent metaphor that encapsulates the author's negotiation with social exclusion, survival, and the paradoxical nature of Dalit existence in Bengal. The water hyacinth serves as a symbol that reflects the author's lived experience of being simultaneously present and absent within Bengali society. Just as the water hyacinth proliferates in waterways while being considered unwanted, Vishwas articulates his community's paradoxical position of being essential to the function of rural Bengal while being socially marginalized. The plant's ability to survive and thrive in polluted waters becomes a metaphor for Dalit resilience and resistance, suggesting how marginalized communities have historically adapted to and survived within this hostile social environments. The symbolism aligns with what recent scholarship has identified as Dalit ecologies. The water hyacinth's rapid reproduction and spread across water bodies in the memoir functions as a symbol of hope and resistance against attempts at social containment. Now, the author's treatment of water hyacinth also reflects broader themes of environmental justice and eco-casteism that characterize Dalit experiences with nature. Unlike the romanticized depiction of nature common in mainstream Bengali literature, Manohar Mauli Vishwas presents a more complex relationship with the natural world, one mediated by caste-based labor relations and environmental degradation. The water hyacinth, often found in polluted waterways where Dalit communities are forced to live and work, become emblematic of how environmental burdens disproportionately affect marginalized communities. The recurrent presence of the water hyacinth throughout the narrative also functions as a temporal marker, connecting the author's childhood memories with his adult reflections on social charge and continuity. The theoretical framework developed by Sharan Kumar Limbale and Jaideep Sarangi in their collaborative work actually emphasizes literature's potential as a weapon for the contesting oppression and imagining alternative social arrangements. The Bishop's novel exemplifies.
Shurupriyo, please try to,
I'm wrapping up, sir, in
within a
1 minute. Please give me 1 minute.
minute or so. Okay,
Okay, sir.
thank you.
Thank you, sir. Uh, the author's emphasis on education as a tool for liberation, while acknowledging its limitations and contradictions, demonstrates the complex relationship between individual mobility and collective transformation that characterizes much of contemporary Dalit literature. Now, uh, the work's ethnographic richness combined with its literary sophistication establishes it as a canonical text both that both preserves cultural memory and challenges dominant narratives about Bengali society. The book's distinctive contribution to Bengali Dalit literature, its testimonial approach, its negotiation with regional literary traditions, and its attention to the specific historical context of Bengal demonstrates the diversity and richness of Dalit literary expression across different regions of India and especially in Bengal. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiruprio. Hate this part where I have to sort of, barge in and suddenly remind people of the shortage of time.
Thank you so much, sir.
It was a very nice paper. I'm not really that introduced to the literature as such, but there are issues which you have talked about, which intrigue me thoroughly, like this triple or even quadruple marginalization and the
Yes, sir.
different dimensions or different layers of, should I say, language, caste, class, displacement of partition, which have underlined Bengali Dalit literature. Or
Absolutely.
we move on to our next speaker, Sarada SM, Assistant Professor of Government KNM Arts and Science College, Kanjiramkulam University of Kerala.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for this opportunity. I am Sharada, Assistant Professor of English from Kerala. Today, I am going to present a paper titled Unveiling Myth, Symbolism and Violence in Amitabh Ghosh's Jungle Nama, a story of the Sundarbans. Jungle Nama was published in 2021 as an allegorical graphic verse novella by Amitabh Ghosh. Now, let's move on to myth. Myth is a legend passed down orally from generation to generation. It often involves gods and goddesses as main characters. In Jungle Nama, we have the forest of Sundarbans as its backdrop. Jungle Nama revolves around the folktale of Born Bibi Johara Nama, which means the narrative of Born Bibi's glory. And Johornama are epic poems composed mainly in a Bengali verse meter known as Dupodi Poyer, the two-footed line. Bon Bibi is a benign forest goddess. It is believed that long ago there lived a demon named Thokin Rai in the forest of Sundarban who hunted animals and humans. He can change his form and shape. Born Bibi was sent from heaven to accomplish a divine mission. She fought with Thokin Rai and defeated him. But she was benevolent. Born Bibi returned half of the kingdom to Thokin Rai even though he was miserably defeated. But the human inhabited parts of the Sundarbans are still under the control of Born Bibi. People who go to forest to collect timber, honey and wax will pray to Bon Bibi to save them from wild animals and Thokinrai. No human would dare to go near Thokinrai's boundary. If anyone enters there, they will be met with disaster. Slow violence is very much evident in Jungle Nama. Slow violence is a term coined by Rob Nixon in his work Slow Violence and Environmentalism of the Poor. Slow violence is environmental damage and its impact in society due to greed and unsustainable practices degrading the environment. Deforestation and pollution causes environmental damage on the Sundarbans ecosystem and its inhabitants. Now, we can look at Thona. Thona is a rich merchant in Jungle Nama who symbolizes greed. He is a perfect example of a man running after wealth. In spite of being wealthy, he entrusts Dukhi, a poor lad, to collect more and more timber, honey, and wax from the Sundarbans, damaging the ecosystem. Thuki is a relative of Thona, but he has lost his father very early and he lives in poor conditions. That's why he agreed to join Thona. Sundarbans represents the universe, a combination of good and evil. Thona promises to offer Dukhi as a sacrifice to Thokinrai, the demon. Dukhi does not know this. Dukhi stands for guilelessness and simplicity. He couldn't make out the devilish intention of Thona. After Thona gets the riches from the forest, he abandons Dukhi. When Thokinrai approaches Dukhi in the form of a tiger, he realizes that his life is in danger. Then he remembers his mother's advice to pray to Bon Bibi to save himself. Then suddenly Bon Bibi appears to his rescue. Dukhi returns home royally with the wealth given by Bon Bibi. Before that, Bon Bibi asks Dukhi to reconcile Thokin Rai. Thus, everything ends happily. Duki says, I quote, Bon Bibi had taught me the secret of how to be happy. All you need to do is to be content with what you have got. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sarda. It's a crisp one, but you could have, because you had time, you could have elaborated a bit more on the issue of slow violence with instances from the text itself. However, we move on to the next participant, the next presenter, Anagha Jyotish, again a research scholar associated with the Department of English, All Saints College, University of Kerala. If you are there, you can start.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Good morning, other participants. My paper is titled Cartographies of the Mind, Men and Masculinities in Here Again Now. Here Again Now is a 2022 novel by Black British writer Okechukwu Neslu. It follows two gay British Nigerian men, Achike and Ekene, and Achike's father Chibuk, through a cross generational narrative of love, loss, and identity. So I have used a Lacanian perspective to study the narrative to explicate how each character's masculinity is shaped by the interplay of the imaginary, symbolic, and the real orders. In the imaginary, these characters they nurture ideal images of themselves, whereas in the symbolic stage they encounter various cultural, linguistic, and paternal laws that try to define their identities. And in the real stage, we see trauma and unspeakable loss that in fact brings out another side of these characters. So Achike, Ekene, and Chibuk struggles to negotiate these orders basically reveals how Black British masculinity is constructed, how it is internalized and contested across generations, relationships, and cultures. So the imaginary for Lacan, it is often associated with the mirror stage. It's like a realm of images, illusions, and idealized unities. So in the novel, each man each man carries an imaginary image of himself or maybe of manhood, and this is kind of constructed using the traditional notions on masculinity or the stereotypes on masculinity in general. So Achike is one character who sees his own image as a whole mature man. That is an ideal I which he constructs in the mirror. Is in fact that is inspired by his father, but his relationship with his father it's not exactly complete. So in course of the novel, we realize that though Chike has constructed for himself an ideal I, it is still not complete. He is still troubled because he questions the ways of performing masculinity. He questions how his father wants him to perform masculinity. And in fact, the novel takes up the question of inheriting performances of masculinity. The question of inheritance is there. So he thinks that he is complete, and he tries to, reach that complete image of himself after getting inspired from the ideal father figure, much like an infant fixates on the mirror image to form a sense of wholeness. But later he understands that this sense of wholeness is kind of fictive or illusory. And even in the novel, this character, he takes continuous therapy sessions also. So this might also be indicative of the kind of psychic troubles that he is undergoing. And Ekene is another character who pretends to be okay, or who happily fits into the traditional figure of man, but or he tries to fit into the stereotype or stereotypes on masculinity. But again, he asks, I'm quoting, why do I have to be this hard painful thing? Why can't I be somebody's boy? So he envies the imaginary position of a carefree child, of somebody's boy, because he thinks that it is impossible to be carefree. It is impossible to ask for comfort and care once you become a man. Uh, So this is something that we see in course of that character's development. In Lacanian language, Ekene's ideal ego is at odds with his desire for this comfort. And another thing that we notice in the novel is that Ekene and Echike, they are similar on many grounds. Both of them are black men living in Britain. They are also gay, and right from the school time itself, they were classmates. And from that time onwards, their names also were similar, were Igbo names. So they share many similar things. So it's like a mirror. We can say that Achike and Ekane are mirror images of one another. So that is also another perspective. And when coming to the father figure Chibuk, he imagines himself as a proud vice patriarch, but in course of the novel, it is revealed that he also is not exactly matching his ideal. And now coming to the symbolic stage, symbolic order is about the network of language, law, and social codes that structure human experiences. And for Lacan, the symbolic includes the big other, the rules, significations, and all of that. So here, the symbolic is represented by family, society, or culture, language, which dictates stoicism or heterosexual, compulsory heterosexuality, and notions like that. So these values are upheld by the characters to an extent, in fact. And the family structure also is important here, as it also functions as a symbolic, symbolic structure at times, because Achike is the son of a single parent and a late arriving father. And even Ekene's case also, the patrilineal lineage is there, because as I have mentioned earlier, there is a way in which masculinity is inherited. There is a way in which the performances of masculinity is inherited. So the fathers pass this on to sons, and even for these fathers, they have inherited it from their own fathers. So it's like a cycle. So in the case of these two men, they also have inherited this from their fathers, but still that inheritance, the process is not complete, so they are still left kind of doubtful. And That is it about the symbolic stage. And in the case of Chibuk, he is like he is a representation of that old symbolic order that is concerned with taboos, and he thinks it is impossible to rewrite the symbolic codes. But as the novel progresses, we see that he also undergoes a change. And the real in Lacan's framework is that which lies beyond symbolization. It's the domain of loss or trauma. So the most important moment in this novel, I mean, the turning point of the novel is the moment of Chike's death. So it happens in the middle of the novel, and after that, the other two men, that is Ekene and Shipu, they are forced to confront their real. So they understand that a lot of things are now similar among them, similar between them. Actually, even earlier it was like that, but they have not. Because of some reasons, they have not pretended to to know that. But now, after the death of Chipu's son and Ekene's best friend or boyfriend, they realize that they are a lot similar. So they both confront a raw grief. And Ekene's earlier lament, I have quoted it, why do I have to be this hard, painful thing, that takes on a new meaning now. And Lacan writes that without the imaginary fictions, the subject encounters the real as terrifying or unbearable. Indeed, this death, it leaves Ekene and Shebuk terrified of a reality without their son or friend. And the novel also notes that they have never truly understood each other. And I quote, "Grief may bring them both the peace and happiness they seek." So it's this loss, it's this trauma that forced them to confront reality. So the novel subtly suggests that it's only by allowing this real trauma to penetrate that we can finally begin expressing ourselves in a better way. So through the interplay of these registers or orders, this novel depicts masculinity as a fragile, contested construction. Each man's subjectivity is like an assemblage of signifiers rather than a fixed entity or a fixed essence. So there are various factors that come into the making of this identity. These characters are black, they are Nigerian born or descended. They are living in Britain. Two of them are homosexual. So the symbolic oppressions they face, there is homophobia, there is racism, patriarchal expectations are there. So these things complicate their journeys. The author demonstrates that Black British masculinity in this masculinity is constructed and contested by the imaginary, symbolic, and real orders. The characters' repeated struggles over language, memory, and feeling. It shows that masculinity is never simply inherited intact. And thus, here again now portrays Black British masculinity not as a static ideal, but as an ongoing process of negotiation. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Anaga. Again, is something that I am not really aware of the particular text that you have talked about, but it seems to be very interesting. You have, particularly stressed on this the parks and problems of adulthood, basically. The world that is exposed to you, the experiences that you have, the memories that you go on collecting, and the trauma of disjuncture, the language that you already have mastered in either expressing or not expressing things, and that's where Lacan has eventually featured. So again, thank you for this wonderful presentation. We move
Thank
on.
you, sir.
Yeah, we move on to our fifth presenter, Mr. Rupam Ghosh, who is an independent researcher associated, but now it seems that University of Calcutta. Are you, Rupam? You are all
Yes, sir.
associated?
Uh, am I
Or,
audible?
oh, yes, please start.
I am not associated with University of Calcutta. I passed out with my
Passed out from.
postgraduate
Okay,
from
that's
Maulana Azad College under CU, and
okay.
I'm looking for an institution to join.
That's
So
right.
yes, there's that. Am I audible properly,
Yes,
everyone?
perfectly. Yeah.
Okay. So good morning, everyone, or whatever is left of it. My name is Rupam Ghosh, and my paper is titled "Role of Market Economy in Shaping State Ideology." I will bring that up in a second. Firstly, I would like to extend my thanks to the chair for allowing me this opportunity. And also, I'd like to point out the irony that we are discussing violence and othering on the day that America decided to bomb Iran so that it could prop up the proto fascist aspirations of Israel, so as to say. But anyway, moving on, my paper it is termed The Role of Market Economy in Shaping State Ideology. I would like to apologize beforehand if my paper is not that literally discussive. I have focused mostly on the theoretical aspects of it, with drawing some inference here and there about the role of economy, as I mentioned. So, growing up, the phrase that I like many before me had painstakingly remembered to fill for the first quotation for our literature essays were: literature is a mirror image of society, a wisdom passed down for generation, indicative of the linkage between society and literature, and also the other way around. The turbulences of our social existence shape the objective of our literature, whereas it is the said literature that trickles down in its varied quality and quantity that determines the social aspirations of where and how it resides, or in many cases, absence from. This interlinkage is as sacred and ancient as time, as the roots of our present heritage can be traced to literary traditions, both oral and written, the association and affiliation with which developed communal existence to bud, flower, prosper, and preserve. In the dark ages before non-fiction, the norm of literature revolved around these axes of society, religion, culture, and community, only where readers reveled in works of its vigor reinstatement, ridiculed the allowable perversion of it, and were blasphemized by the abeyance of the same. These traditions carry the apparitions of the binary oppositions we still face around the world, however, with the added tarka of perhaps the most important leveler and divider in the element of modern economics. The mechanized voyages of the Western world, which hitherto were restricted to mostly spice, coinage, alcohol, and limited cultural transactions near the port cities, necessitated a shift in the mode of production. The Occidental West became the cultural and material exporter, and its Oriental counterpart the unwilling customer. The shift was fueled by the steam wagon of mechanization, the changes arising out of which faced criticism as well as elicited aspirations, depending on the class and the part of the world to which it belonged. The shift from a feudo-agrarian system to a bourgeois-proletariat duality called for a shift in governance as well as the means of allocation. The French Revolution ushered in an age of political representation of the masses, where it was necessary for the state to accommodate for the measures allowing an equitable participation in and a sustainable allocation from the budding means of production. The rise of communist literature aided to this extent, as for the first time the displaced fiefdom found a class and creed where they could uniformly coexist in. The political half-life that we could observe in Europe till the mid-19th century was about to face a complete overhaul. The views of the state in religious matters were rendered secondary, with the existential struggle now revolving around the human and pecuniary capital. Marx's seminal works as an antithesis to that of Adam Smith's Wealth of the Nations, which many have widely regarded as the capitalist constitution. Marx called for the acknowledgement of the exploitation of the working class alongside the value of labor it so provides. Isaiah Berlin puts Marx's ideas as one of the few ideas which have done as much as harm as the belief in inevitability of historical laws, as Marx's call for a future communist utopia had embedded in it an absurdness of thoughts by the Victorian standards, which is beyond the scope of our discussion today. Economic policy of today is political ideology in action. On the basis of the difference of state resources allocation to capital building and social upliftment, we can broadly divide present economies as leaning towards either one or an unique mixture of both, as in the case of India. As the linkage between literature and society previously mentioned in the beginning, the shift was well documented, and the support for both for and against was also recorded. One of the most delectable works of the agency of capitalism, or to an extent, the aspiration to riches beyond imagination, can be found in Dumas' evergreen novel, The Count of Monte Cristo, where the solution to Edmond Dante's multitude of crises lay in the discovery of unlimited wealth, which allowed him to extract revenge on his enemies, if not outwitting them first in their circles of generational wealth, affluence, and influence, which were the primary agents of the violence meted out to him at Chateau d'If for 14 years. The mere notion that by accessing such a power would transform one into an agent of divinity sowed a seed of aspiration which can be traced in the rapid mechanization and accumulation of wealth in the decades following its first serialized publication in 1844. A counter-argument to this school of capitalist fantasy was serialized by a school of humanist writers, poets, and columnists, a significant number of whom have made their mark in Bengali literature. The end to Joy Goswami's poem Noon or Salt encompasses a plea for the assured basic sustenance in the form of salt atop a bowl of rice. Reduces the fantastic to the basic, as the poet aspires for the readers to empathize with the protagonist who cannot escape the inevitability of the annihilations of his aspirations, as the cogs and wheels of a capitalist society inhibits his own human agency to mature into fruition. The half-cycle nature of our world's political axis can be traced easily with the help of literary history, especially European, which stood and flowed between the decades of religious conservatism, followed by a breath of liberalized air. The same can be said for centuries following the mix-up between the state and economic ideology. While the pre-established orders opted for a market-driven export machinery, the new kids in the bloc opted for an economy of self-sufficiency and socialism, both under the supervisory watchtower of society, which is similar but not limited to Orwell's ideation of the Big Brother. The violence of othering becomes the most discernible through the media representation and trials of both sides of the spectrum. The famous public witch hunting of the communists in 1960s America among celebrities and the people of popular influence by the Senate's House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC, speaks of an anxiety of a loosening grip on the mass as a result of decades of starvation and instability in a Cold War scenario. Arthur Miller's Crucible, set during the 1692 Salem witch trials, speaks in an autobiographical tone of the tactics of fear and shaming used to suppress a different thought. He himself was called before the HUAC and so writes, "We are what we always were in Salem, but now the little crazy children are jangling the keys of the kingdom." This genre of the or this trend of shaming people, it can also be noticed in other works. The most popular of them have been in the recent movie based on Oppenheimer, where it is also called before such a committee to explain on his alleged involvement with communist ideals. The genre of jingoistic nationalism was gentrified through movies in Hollywood, which continued to show the socialist countries, especially USSR, as a seat of evil, followed by the emergence of heroes such as Rambo, exemplifying the Western infallibility. The scenario was opposite but not quite different in a slowly emerging socialist China, wherein a bid of alleviating the populace out of poverty, the government resorted to a method of uprooting the prevalent social hierarchy of elites and scholars in order for the new normal to set in. Akin to the jhum farming in India, which is a technique of slashing and burning before sowing new seeds. You Who Was to Live narrates the fall of Shu Fujui, a formerly wealthy landowner, as his life is consumed by the sweeping campaigns of communist China. From land reform to cultural revolution, the state-sponsored violence meted out to elites and scholars rendered Fugui to a state of desolation, and he recounts, those who had eaten their fill every day now starved to death, while those who had starved all their lives continued to starve. Formed by, for, and of the people, such socialist states were meant to uphold values of personal freedom and collective prosperity, which it sadly has failed to achieve, as dissent is deliberately confused with opposition and thereby othering the element. One of the most memorable pictures, I would not call it memorable, but of the most iconic pictures related to such depression can be seen on the picture of Tiananmen Square in 1989, which I have not included in this presentation as it is, as I mentioned, beyond the scope of our discussion. But the oppression of a single person by a series of war tanks, it speaks volumes. Althusser, in his seminal work on ideology and ideological state apparatuses, speaks of the different agencies by which the state works to appropriate its subjects in subjugation. While access to monetary and social security works as binding forces for most, but for whom this failed to suffice, the repressive assumes a form of hitherto unforeseen nature, as in the pictures which I talked about. To conclude, I would like to emphasize on the duality of presence of such power in our own current context. Being a mixed economy, India has never seen a historic prevalence of shifting to an extreme. While aspirations have changed over the years, the core governance has been mostly community oriented. The publication of India's best written subaltern text in Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things during the economic liberalization speak of the intertwinedness of such confused existence, the survival of which is necessary for the survival of our basic national fabric. Thank you.
Thank you, Rupam. This is quite a subject, and people definitely would like to know about it a lot more, because you have just given a kind of a bare outline. But I'm thoroughly impressed, because you have talked about certain issues which are very, very close to, you know, some of the researchers, as well as the literati basically, who keep talking about these issues
And it
the,
also has an, sorry sir if I sorry sir
no,
for
no, no, no,
interrupting.
please
And it
carry on.
also has an added connotation for us, as Calcutta has gone through both the stages of firstly of capitalist aspirations, and then through a regime of communist aspirations as well.
True, absolutely
So
true.
it is kind of intertwined between us in our psyche to some extent.
Thank you. It was quite an interesting one.
Thank you so much.
So we move on to our next speaker, Devdatta or Devdatta Mitro. Uh,
Yes, sir.
Devdatta, okay,
Yes, sir.
Devdatta Mitro from St. Xavier's University, Kolkata.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
Okay. Good morning, sir, and good morning to all the participants today. The title of my paper is Walls of Memory, Self Imprisonment, Trauma, and Collective Guilt in Sartre's The Prisoners of Altona. Since this is a very brief synopsis of the paper that I intend to write, I'll focus on four aspects which are present in the title itself. The first is prisoners and the meaning of prisoners in this play. Second is self imprisonment. Third, trauma, and fourth, I'll conclude with the idea of collective guilt. First, the translation itself. The translation is very interesting because majority, the original is Les Sequestries d'Altona. That implies two meanings. The first is prisoners. The second is Condemned. The translation that I found, which is a much better adaptation to what I'm going to speak of, is this condemned. Now, what is the difference? In Sartrean existentialism, the terms condemned and prisoners represent distinct concepts tied to his philosophy of freedom and responsibility. Prisoner denotes physical or situational confinement, which does not negate ontological freedom. Sartre insists that a prisoner remains free because his consciousness cannot be imprisoned. So, for example, a prisoner can have freedom within physical barriers. Condemned, however, is what I want to focus off over here, and this is the translation of the original by Sylvia and George Lesson. Condemned implies universal human condition of ontological freedom. Sartre argues that humans are condemned to be free, a very famous quote, because we are thrust into existence without a predetermined purpose. This freedom is inescapable. Even, in fact, refusing choice is a choice itself. It carries with itself existential anguish as we bear responsibility for creating our essence through our own actions. This existential anguish of being condemned is explored through the psychological unraveling of the protagonist, Franz von Gerlach, who is a Second World War veteran, returns from the World War, confines himself to his attic for 13 years. First, the now second point, the idea of self-imprisonment, and how does it act as an existential refuge? Franz's physical seclusion symbolizes a desperate escape from confronting his wartime actions. He creates a delusional world where Germany remains in ruins, recording messages for a future century to justify his existence. This self confinement reflects Sartre's existential theme. Franz chooses self imprisonment to avoid the unbearable burden and freedom itself of facing his own guilt. His room becomes a metaphorical hell where he enacts his own judgment, mirroring Sartre's assertion that, and this is, I quote once again from Wicklow, hell is other people. Self imprisonment, or as Leo Fretz puts it in his essay titled Individuality in Sartre's Philosophy, he calls it ontological solitude. This idea is often seen in his plays. Initially, and for example, if we talk about Orestes in The Flies, which is another famous work, Orestes embodies this idea of ontological solitude. There's a part in the play where towards the end he chooses to avenge his father, and he takes the guilt of the entire community and says very, very poignantly, I am my freedom. Why am I bringing in Orestes over here? Because even though Orestes and Franz are very similar to each other, as in both of them have solitude, ontological solitude, the difference is that Franz chooses to live in an inauthentic existence. The idea of inauthenticity is a very loaded term, of course, that many of us know, and I'm going to explain this in greater detail in my paper itself. Third, the idea of trauma. Now, Franz's trauma stems from layered betrayals and atrocities. What are these betrayals and atrocities? First, complicity, the family's complicity in genocide. His father leased the family land to the Nazis for a concentration camp. In fact, 30,000 Jews were supposedly died in this land, in this concentration camp. Second, the personal betrayal. Franz's father, Otto von Gerlach, he hid a Jewish rabbi in the house and very cunningly reported the man to the SS as well, which led to the rabbi's execution. In spite of Franz hating his father for the acts that he had committed previously, he is forced into the army. But he does not remain, he has his own delusion. What is this? He tortures prisoners and he enables massacres. In fact, interestingly, Franz becomes and he's named the Butcher of Smolensk. These ideas, along with other ideas as well, which I'm not discussing right now, this creates a psyche in France. What is this? It is deeply fractured by his traumatic experiences during and after the Second World War. And this, as I've previously discussed, leads to vivid hallucinations and a breakdown of reality. The most striking delusion of Franz is the belief that he's being judged by crabs. And it is an irrational, recurring hallucination that symbolizes his overwhelming guilt and paranoia. This fixation on crabs as judges reflects his ability to process or atone for his actions as a Nazi officer, particularly his complicity to war crimes and atrocities. This self imposed confinement intensifies his psychological deterioration. He is isolated in his attic, as I told you, for 13 years and constructs this alternate reality where the war has never ended and Germany is still on the verge of winning the war, even though it is in shambles. This delusional world in that attic serves both as a shield from the outside and a prison of his own making, amplifying his sense of persecution and moral agony. The hallucinations, such as the crabs, are externalizations of his guilt and fear of judgment, both from history and from himself. This breakdown of reality is a classic response to unresolved trauma. As he loses touch with the present, Franz's mind becomes dominated by the past and its horrors, blurring the boundaries between memory, fantasy, and hallucination. His inability to reconcile with his actions or seek genuine redemption traps him in a cycle of self torment where imaginary creatures become the arbitrators of his fate, a concept that I'll discuss in my paper later. Next, the idea of collective guilt. The father, Otto von Gerlach, is dying of cancer, and he represents a capitalist collaboration with Nazism. In fact, the father bribed officials to shield France from his war crime trials, symbolizing the post war amnesty that prioritized economic revival over justice. Lenny, who is Franz's sister, is an enabler of his delusions. She's the one who is constantly giving him food in that attic. And there is an element of incestuous relationship in her fascination towards Franz, towards her brother. This reflects on the myths of victimhood, and I'll discuss how it later sustained national denial as well. Werner, who is so Franz, he has a brother and a sister. The sister is Lenny, the one who gives him food, and the brother is Werner, and Werner's wife, Joanna. Werner is constantly struggling to expose Franz, and this mirrors generational conflict. Joanna, Werner's wife, there's a constant flux in her character. On one hand, she is to an extent, and I'll use this word, obsessed with Franz. She's fascinated by the enigmatic picture that Franz presents. But on the other hand, she's constantly attempting to force accountability, and this underscores that when this accountability fails, she's unsuccessful. This underscores the society's refusal to confront its past. This refusal embodies Germany's unresolved guilt, where perpetrators become victims of their own moral decay. Now, Franz's self imposed confinement and psychological breakdown are not just individual responses to guilt. They mirror a national refusal to confront the full extent of responsibility for the Holocaust and wartime atrocities. Therefore, instead of seeking an authentic atonement or facing justice, what does Franz do? He retreats into a delusion, convincing himself that Germany is the victim of the war and denying the reality of its renewed prosperity. This self victimization is a form of bad faith, where the perpetrator avoids the anguish of accountability by adopting the posture of the wronged or the suffering party. Bad faith is, to put it very simply, it is a part of existentialism. It's a concept of existentialism which implies self deception. Again, a very easy way to say it. Franz's portrayal, or sorry, what was I saying? Yes, Sartre's portrayal of Franz's madness.
Sir, we
Yeah,
don't really have a lot of time left. Okay,
right.
could
So
you
I'll
maybe
conclude in a
minute
minute.
or yeah, please.
Sure, sir. Okay, so I'm almost towards the end of my presentation. So, what I plan to discuss in the paper is how Franz's madness, eventual madness, his hallucination, isolation, obsessive recording, how does this lead to trauma? Next, I'll also discuss the fact that Sartre's critique of 1950s France is also an implication for the colonial violence in Algeria. Because in one of the lines, France says, when the country is in danger, anyone can become a torturer. Lastly, I'll also discuss the fact that the how does France die? So he and his father leave the attic because they are unable to confront their own actions, and they commit suicide. It's a form of escapism as well, which Sartre was against. I'm done. I hope I didn't take too much time.
Not at all, not at all, Doctor. Thank you very much. It's an interesting observation. You began with this, with this focus on the difference between the two translations, perhaps condemned and prisoner, the translations that we often deal with when it comes to Jean-Paul Sartre. And definitely, I'm reminded of what he writes in What is Literature. Uh, we can think of uh, literature dealing with something which is apparently bad and not good, or even in the typically Kantian term, what doesn't really fit the categorical imperative thing. But as such, there is no bad literature. So unless there is this state of being condemned, you can be a prisoner and you still will not be condemned as such, because there are shades, of course, of meaning. So thank you, and we move on to our next participant, Partho Pramanik, who's a visiting professor, Technology, Salt Lake.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Okay, sir. Good morning, sir, and good morning to all other participants. So, the paper I am going to present today is titled When Care is Conditional, the Medicalization of Feminine Disability and Familial Complicity in Mahesh Dattani's Tara. Though the figure like Mahesh Dattani does not need any kind of formal introduction, but I would like to start my presentation with a very brief introduction of Dattani and his play Tara. So we all know that Dattani is one of the most powerful voices in the Indian contemporary theatre, and he always challenges the societal norms and talks about the marginalized voices, be it Bravely for the Queen or Dance Like a Man or any other play. And Tara is also not an exception. It was first performed on the stage in the year of 1990. And it actually talks about the deeply rooted gender discrimination, the familial and societal gendered bias, through the story of the conjoined twin, the Siamese twin, Chandan and Tara. And in my presentation, I would basically try to focus on main four questions. The very first question I want to focus on, that is how the medicalization of the female body becomes a kind of method of patriarchal normalization. So in Tara, we can see the conjoined twin, Tara and Chandan, has to go through a separation surgery, but it will be very wrong to say that it was just a clinical choice, clinical decision, because it deep down, it actually reflects the deeply rooted patriarchal mindset in the family. Despite having the medical advice from Dr. Thakkar that Tara has the better chance to live with the two legs, have a healthy life. But the family decides to give the leg to Chandan in order to favor the male child. And this is how we often see that how the society often prioritize the male child over any female child. And this surgical process was not at all a kind of corrective treatment. Rather, it can be termed as a kind of gendered form of medicalization. And whenever we are talking about the gendered form of medicalization, I think we should bring the concept of medical gaze that was introduced by Foucault in his book, The Birth of the Clinic. So, according to Foucault, the medical gaze is something in which the patient becomes the case, the body, and the field signs to read, so that all the institution can easily observe and easily correct and control the body. And in the play Tara, we can see that Tara's body becomes a kind of body of the experiment in order to favor the male child, the body of the male child. Though Bharti, their mother, claims that this decision was taken for the good of both of them, but it was actually a lie, because Tara was actually sacrificed so that Chandan can appear as a whole. And also, on the other hand, we can also take the name of Susan Wendell, and she argues in her book The Rejected Body, I'm quoting her: disability is just a product of interaction between the individual and an applied society, rather than just a biological condition. In the play Tara, we can see that Tara was not actually born as the disabled one. Rather, the familial institution, medical institution, and the social institution actually make her the disabled one. And the post-surgical disabilities that she has to go through can be seen as a punishment, as a kind of process of silencing the female body and female voice at the same time. And whenever we are talking about this medical discourse and all, we cannot overlook the transparency, the responsibility of the medical profession. The profession which is supposed to give the equal treatment to everyone, irrespective of any gender bias or any kind of sexuality or racism, anything. But here in Tara, we can see that this medical discourse, this medical profession becomes a kind of flag bearer of gender discrimination. Because at the very first, we can see Dr. Thakkar did not agree to do this gender bias surgery of separation. But when later, when Bharti's father allures Dr. Thakkar with some bribe and all, he easily agrees to this. And this is where we can question the transparency of medical profession. And again, I just want to say that this surgery, this separation surgery, was not to correct Tara's body at all, but it was a kind of process to snatching away all the freedom, all the liberty, and the voices of a female. And this is how the medical discourse, the medical profession becomes a kind of practitioner who actually produce and promote the gender discrimination and disability. And with that, I would like to focus on my next question of discussion, that is how the familial love can be conditional, and they can end up getting into the process of marginalization and othering. So in India, in our society, we can often see that familial love is often termed as unconditional. We often celebrate our parents, we often worship them as the divine power. But Dattani's Tara actually throws a vital question to us. This is this kind of familial love is truly unconditional? Because if we closely observe at our surrounding, we can often see that just like charity begins at home, all the societal disease like racism, homophobia, queerphobia, misogyny, all the social diseases actually has a deep roots in his family also. And Tara is not an exception, because in Tara, in the very first scene, very first half of the play, we can see that Bharti, Tara's mother, is actually asking Tara again and again to finish a glass of milk. So at the very first glance, it might be taken as a very maternal care and love. But as the play progresses further, we get to know that it was not at all maternal care or maternal love, but it was a care and love out of guilt. It was a kind of act of atonement, because she was involved in the surgical betrayal, the decision she once took at that point of time. And in this regard, again, we can mention the concept, the burden of care, introduced by Susan Wendell. She claims that families frequently view disabled relatives as a drain, an obligation, or an emotional debt, instead of as an independent people. So the overwhelming love that Bharti shows for Tara, it was not just for empowering Tara. Rather, it was a kind of process of silencing Tara's voice. pain. And this is where Tara becomes a kind of embodiment of the depth. And whenever we are talking about family, we must talk about the father as well. But father here, Mr. Patel, was a kind of silent arm of patriarchy. Since he was a kind of dependent financially on Bharti and Bharti's father, he didn't have much voice and opinion to contribute at that point of time. But his initial detachment from the children and later revelation of the surgical truth to his children makes him kind of involved in the process of marginalization. Also, if we keep it aside, we can see that in one scene where Chandan asks his father to take Tara with him in the office because he thinks that Tara has much more potential to be a businesswoman. And we can see that Mr. Patel immediately disapproved the proposal. So it reveals a kind of deeply rooted patriarchal mindset that he possesses, that he thinks that maybe office is not made for women. So this is how he also becomes the practitioner of gender discrimination. And the Chandan's role, his brother's role, is kind of complicated because throughout the play, we can see that Chandan has a kind of dedicated love, sincere love for Tara. Even she wants to dedicate a story titled Twinkle Tara for her deceased sister. And when he's recollecting all his memories and everything, he once mentioned that we are still the Siamese twin. We are still the conjoined twins. And it actually reveals that how emotionally dependent Chandan is on Tara. But at the end of the final act, we can also see that he also mentioned that forgive me, Tara, forgive me for making it my tragedy. So this is a question that raises a kind of doubt in our mind as an audience, so whether Chandan's love for Tara was truly unconditional or not. And whenever we are talking about family, we have to talk about the extended family as well, because in our India, society is often considered as a extended family. We often get concerned about what society will say. For your information, we can see that society did not treat Tara well. Society did not give any kind of love to Tara. Rather, it kind of ostracized Tara from the mainstream of the society. Because in one scene, we can see that there are three mean girls named Rupa, Prema, and Nalini, who made fun of the prosthetic leg of Tara. Not only that, in another scene we can see Rupa also calls her Tara as a freak, and she also used an abusive and humiliating term for the disabled one, that is Vandu Tara, which means the odd type. So this is how the society always pulls us down and never gives us the opportunity to uplift. So all the love that Tara actually gets from the family, it was very much calculated, it was very much managed. And this is how Tara challenges the romanticized concept of familial unconditional love. And with that, I would like to focus on the third question of mine. It is very short section.
Partho, 1 more minute, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, so okay, so we can see that how Tara becomes the other through the gaze. Okay, so in this play we can see that Tara is a titular character, but most of the time we can see Tara is spoken about rather than spoken to. We can see her experience, trauma, and all the emotional turmoil she has gone through the narrative voice of Chandan, through the recollection of memory of Chandan and regret. So this is where comes the concept of gaze, which was introduced by Laura Mulvey in her feminist film theory, that according to Mulvey, women are placed as object to male desire in patriarchal narratives, leading to their state up to be looked atness. Though Mulvey's idea of gaze is very complicated over here, because Tara was never sexualized, but she was always a kind of objectified. She was always a site of guilt, pity, and a kind of remorse of this kind of thing. And also, as an audience, we also see that we are very much comfortable to see Tara through the eyes of Chandan, through the recollection of memories, the regret of Chandan. And with that, I would focus on the fourth point. It's a very short one: how Tara reclaims her power through and becomes visible through her invisibility. So, later half of the play, we can see that Tara has already dead, and though we never feel the physical absence of Tara, rather she was very much present throughout the narrative through Chandan's recollection of memories and regret and everything. Tara becomes a kind of haunting present throughout the stage. And also the credit goes to Mayas Dattani. Mayas Dattani gives a kind of powerful voice, a kind of power to Tara, because the way she portrays Tara as an intelligent and a very witty girl, rather than portraying her as a very meek and kind of very poor disabled child, it actually gives Tara a voice. And also he uses the powerful tool, dramatic tool, the memory pretty well, because through this memory, through the recollection of memory, Tara became a kind of immortal being. And to conclude my discussion, I would like to say that it can be said that the play Tara is beyond a theater. It actually dismantled all the concept of the romanticized concept of the familial love and care of the family, and it also expresses a kind of explores, a kind of exposes how far a family, the society can go in order to favor a particular gender. And it also reveals the ugly face of the society, and it also gives a kind of very beautiful message to us that the real care actually begins where the bias ends, and the compensation can never be termed as love when we are equally practicing the patriarchal hierarchies. So that's all my presentation. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you, Partho. Uh, I have always kind of found the observation pretty weird whenever people have said that Tara is less about Tara and more about Chandan's guilt and Chandan's tragedy, because it is often, uh, you know, the entire thing is shaped and designed through Chandan's narrative and Chandan's point of view. This is nothing but a kind of a romanticization of the very idea of, again, patriarchy reigns supreme, because it is more concerned in giving that kind of status to Chandan than to Tara.
Yes, sir.
Nice one. And we move on to Pooja Machi. If you are there, you are from Banaras Hindu University. Pooja, if you are there, please start your presentation.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, participants.
Good.
I'd like to share a PPT. Is it visible, sir?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. The title of my paper is Surveillance and Silencing as Violence in Anurag Kashyap's film No Smoking. Violence can be perpetuated in many ways. Silencing the voice of the oppressed is all an act of violence. There are many ways to silence an individual. It can be done via threats of harming the reputation, bodily harm, or threats to harm family members. Surveillance is a very powerful tool in silencing an individual. If one person gets silenced through these methods, the same methods are applied to more people, and it starts a pattern in silencing the voices contradictory to the narrative set by the state. In Anurag Kashyap's film No Smoking, we see similar patterns in silencing. The protagonist, Cale, gets threatened in multiple ways. He tries multiple methods to escape, but he fails. I'm focusing on the process and patterns of silencing. That I'm also looking into the network of surveillance which aids in silencing the protagonist. According to Oxford Handbook, surveillance is commonly defined as close observation, especially of a suspected person, or as the act of carefully watching someone or something, especially in order to prevent or detect crime. Nevertheless, majority of surveillance technologies currently in use are not
Pooja, I don't know whether Pooja, your audio is getting disrupted. Some connectivity issues, I guess. I don't know whether you'll be able to manage it because when but there is a problem like this, it becomes very, very difficult to manage. Kindly go slow or do something to improve, if it is possible at all, to improve the connection. It's almost like you are audible, but then we can only hear parts of your uh, lecture. Okay, we will. Let's see whether she's able to come back a little later. If time permits, we will give her some time at the end of this session. Without further ado, I would invite Ningombam Singh, who is the assistant professor of Dhanamanjuri College of Arts and Dhanamanjuri University, Manipur. If you are there, please begin.
Good morning, sir, and good morning to all the participants. Sir, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir, for giving me this chance to present this paper. Okay, I'll start. The title of my paper is Power of Memory and Nostalgia in Tennessee Williams, The Glass Menagerie. Okay, The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams is a memory play that revolves around a dysfunctional Winfield family consisting of the mother Amanda and her two children, Tom and Laura. Left by her husband a long time back, Amanda strives hard to make ends meet. The inability to secure the future of Tom and Laura as a responsible mother reflects her dejection and defeat amidst the furor of the American dream. Now, in the uh, play, Tennessee Williams pins down the significance of the functional role of memory and nostalgia. Memory is part and parcel of the human identity, and human beings usually possess traces of memory, and they cannot cut themselves off from the recollective dimension of past events. In the inaugural speech of the class menagerie, Tom, the protagonist of the play, sets forth the framework within which the play is put. It revolves around the Wingfields' incapability to conform themselves to the normal course of life. The action of the play is for the most part narrated through memory. Tom addresses the audience in this way, I quote, "The play is memory. Being a memory play, it is dimly lighted. It is sentimental. It is not realistic. In memory, everything seems to happen to music that explains the fiddle in the wings. I am the narrator of the play and also a character in it. The other characters are my mother, Amanda, my sister Laura, and a gentleman caller who appears in the final scenes." Unquote. Okay, so the narrator clearly furnishes the audience with the key things to digest the content of the play. Memory is encapsulated in the character of Tom, who unmasks important facts about his family. The members of this family live on the memories of the past, memories that mirror their social and psychological sides. More to the point, Tom presents the memories in a subjective manner. He is totally captivated by the memories of his past, for he always recounts the others' experience in connection to him. From the outset of the play, Tom and Amanda show themselves to have a different perspective of life. Tom spends most of his time seeking new adventures, not to mention his addiction to drinking. His mother often complains that he inherited uh, this personal trait from his father, who had left them. Meanwhile, Amanda tirelessly attempts to change the life of her children for the better. Amanda's memory of her failure with Mr. Wingfield constitutes the prime mover of her determination to make her children shirk the path of failure she had once trodden. For them, she wants a resounding success. So she greatly attaches to the echoes of her memory when she was young. Amanda feels herself placed in a position that pushes her not to repeat the gross follies of the dim past. Likewise, the daughter, Laura, lives on the periphery of her remorseful memories. Physically handicapped, she exerts great efforts to compensate this inferiority complex in the hope of finding herself a place in her society. Glass collection or the glass menagerie in which she is interested confirms her fragile character. She is like her glass menagerie, susceptible to breaking. As an escape, she shows great interest in this brittle glass collection. Such a social withdrawal is conceived of as an outlet for her growing frustration, a frustration that is primarily caused by her physical deformity. Her situation is rather exacerbated by the Wingfield's excessive care of her. Amanda always thinks it is advisable to marry off her daughter to a gentleman caller because Laura has become nubile. Now, this idea of getting a gentleman caller is like a demon that possesses Amanda's mind, and she convinces her daughter to accept on finding a new suitor. So, on Amanda's advice, Laura rethinks of getting married after she had abandoned the obsession that she is unfit for marriage. Upon the news of Jim O'Connor, who is the gentleman caller for Laura, imminent arrival at the Wingfields household, Amanda, Tom, and Laura are making different preparation to receive the hoped for gentleman caller. But they are going to expect something which is totally against what they believe. To Laura's utter astonishment, Jim is the person whom she met in high school. The recent meeting sets light on her secret life, which remained untold to her family. Jim says that this way of life is not suitable for a girl like Laura, who is much occupied with her glass menagerie. Among the animals in this collection is the unicorn, an extinct animal which stands for Laura's fragile character. So Laura is living in a ramshackle world. One exacerbated things for Laura is that her flickering hopes of marrying Jim is devastated by Jim's pending marriage to one of his acquaintances. So just as Tom opens the glass menagerie with its thematic, historical, and social background, so he ends it with memory. The glass menagerie is an archetypal sample of the memory of social disintegration. It displays the role and power of memory and its impact on the character's mode of thought. Almost all characters find it as a center from the pressures of life to focus on the point that man cannot be separated from the echoes of the past. Tennessee Williams adroitly weaves memory and nostalgia in the texture of the story of the Wingfields family. This family, which is possessed with the idea that memory gives them an effective but temporary escape from reality. So, through memory and nostalgia, William delves into the psychological constructions of his character. And to conclude, in Genesis Williams' The Glass Menagerie, memory and nostalgia are central themes, shaping the characters' perception of reality and influencing their actions. The play, presented as a memory play, explores how past experiences, particularly those colored by nostalgia, can both offer refuge and become a source of pain and limitations. Characters like Amanda and Laura find solace in idealized memories of the past, while Tom grapples with guilt and a desire to escape his present circumstances, ultimately revealing the power and often destructive impact of memory on their lives. So, in essence, the Glass Menagerie is a powerful exploration of how memory and nostalgia shape individual lives, creating both a sense of comfort and a source of pain. The play demonstrates how the past can both haunt and shape the present, influencing characters, actions, relationships, and their ability to find happiness and fulfillment in their lives. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. But one thing, it's kind of confusing. Why would we be focusing entirely on memory and nostalgia, and
Yes, sir.
not really connected with violence, which is the thrust area, right? So I was expecting in your paper something of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
sort,
sure.
like that particular dimension remains
Yeah,
almost
yeah, sure, sir.
also. Anyway, so we move on to our second last presenter, Anvesha Singh Rathore, Vellore Institute of Technology, Vellore. If you are there, please begin your presentation.
Good morning, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Good morning. Please
Good
begin.
morning, sir. Um, Good morning, everyone. My name is Anvesha Singh Rathore. I'm a research scholar from VIT Vellore. My topic is Reclaiming Body Agency, the Transgender Narrative of Manobi Bandyopak. A Gift of Goddess Lakshmi is the life story of Manobi, who is India's first openly transgender college principal in West Bengal. So she was born as a male. Her name was Somnath, and she transformed herself into a female, a trans woman named Manobi. Her biography breaks silences around transgender struggles. She openly addresses pain and rejection. By narrating her own story, Manobi claims space in public discourses, reclaiming her identity and resisting erasure. Her gender affirming surgery, that is, reassignment surgery, was a bold step that confirmed her identity and helped her reclaim her bodily agency, which gave her control over her own body. She took a brave step by seeking counseling and psychological support and eventually undergoing sex reassignment surgery to align with her true identity, which has paved way for the young transgender individuals to embrace their identities with courage and also hope. Through this process, she also sheds light on the medical and the social exclusions faced by the transgender communities, calling for a structural and a systemic change. The name of the book is A Gift of Goddess Lakshmi, a candid biography of India's first transgender principal. So, this term candid biography of Manavi, she shares her lived experience of a transgender individual. This term candid is a juxtaposition with the contents of the books, as she narrates her struggles and traumas as a transgender, non-conforming child. She was born and brought up in Hugli's Chandranagar, West Bengal. Her journey from marginalization to empowerment is marked by a conscious reclaiming of her body and gender identity. She speaks openly about enduring abuse, shame, and exclusion, especially in her own family. She narrates her pain through memories of family rejection, where her gender non-conformity made her feel like failures in the eyes of her family. The reason was the basic ideological differences, we could say that. Um, Manavi has used her story of trauma and exploitation as a trans woman to raise awareness and educate others. Her story offers a fresh perspective on the role of trans women in literature and art, such as we could say exploration of themes of trans violence, patriarchal privilege as a male, sexuality, gender reaffirming surgery. For instance, even though we could say that she was mistreated by her family, but still she was given an opportunity to study. As she came from a very humble and good family, access to education became a very crucial stepping stone in her journey, eventually leading to widespread recognition through numerous awards and accolades she received. Her presence in the institutional and public spaces challenges the existing power hierarchies, which advances in visibility and inclusion of trans voices in mainstream discourse. Further, we do question how do narratives like a gift of goddess Lakshmi reshape our understanding of gender, agency, and power. We could put up 4 points. First, exposing structural inequality. She does so by highlighting the institutional and cultural barriers trans people face in education, career, opportunities, and healthcare. Second point would be deconstructing gender binaries. Her biography challenges rigid male female classification, specifically starting from her family itself. Third point would be promoting trans inclusivity. She advocates for a transformation of public and academic spaces that make room for marginalized voices and diverse gender expression. She does so where she fights her male colleagues and other people who are pushing her down, and she also reports for harassment, and she accuses people who have harassed her for rape, and she fights for justice also. Fourth point is challenging social norms. She puts up points like caste, patriarchy, and traditional gender roles, connecting the trans rights to fight for equality. The story itself provides us insight into a patriarchal structure where she was repeatedly abused and shamed for her feminine characteristics, example applying kajal and lipsticks and wearing frocks of her sisters. She was even harassed and molested by so-called masculine men of her society. In fact, one of her cousins raped her repeatedly for years. She questioned the heterosexual norms and socially imposed sexuality that shamed her for openly talking about her same-sex desire, where the stigma of being homosexual, it impacted her mental health. Manavi is a writer, activist, educator, and also a theatre artist, where through her creative and academic contributions, she has given voice to marginalized and sexual subalterns. The book she has authored addresses topics such as sex education, gender stereotyping, and discrimination faced by transgender individuals. Also, she has talked on theatre of third sex. Further moving on, the key themes which have been identified after reading the narratives of Manavi Bandyopadhyay. First is bodily autonomy and agency. Second is societal norms and resistance. Third is gender identity. Fourth is advocacy for sexual subaltern. And fifth is questioning heteronormative culture. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ananda. Thank you. We are more or less acquainted with the figure of Mukherjee,
Yes, sir.
especially those who are privileged to be Calcuttans or not Calcuttans from West Bengal.
Yes, sir. Even I am waiting for have a meeting with her, but I don't know if it's possible or not. I am right now in South. So maybe if I get an opportunity to come there and meet her.
Definitely, quite an inspiring figure. And then listening to her and seeing her, it feels that the subaltern can actually speak. So, and let's hope for the best as far as their feminism is concerned.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. And we move on to our last participant in the session, Faraz Sudla, who will be speaking on No Matter Belong, Loss of Home and Identity, Narratives of Child Displacement and Migration.
Thank you for introducing me, sir. Good morning, everyone present here. I would like to present my work titled. First of all, am I audible, sir? Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I'm here to present my work titled Nowhere to Belong, Loss of Home and Identity in Narratives of Childhood Displacement and Migration. Well, the study is a collaborative work by myself, Parasuba, and Dr. Javed Rashid from the Department of Social Work, University of Kashmir. Well, introducing the study, I would like to give a background of the work, and that is displacement is not just about physical relocation, it's a rupture in belonging, identity, and emotional stability. Children who are especially vulnerable during developmental stage face this disruption most intensely. Literature and media serve as a mirror, helping us reflect on and understand the depth of this impact on the young lives. Well, the objectives of the study were threefold. Number one was to analyze how children undergoing forced migration are portrayed in narratives. Second one was to examine how they remember home and experience emotional dislocation. And the third objective was to understand how they reconstruct their identity using trauma and protection frameworks. The methodology that was used for this study involved qualitative research method, and then the data was analyzed with the help of content analysis. Our data came from selected novels, films, and visual media focusing on child migrants and refugees, and our analytical lens focused on three main aspects. Number one was cultural alienation. Number second was fragmented memory and nostalgia, and third one was disrupted and evolving identity. Through this, we uncovered a deep emotional and narrative portrayal of displaced children that speaks both of trauma and subtle resilience. The core themes of the study were basically four. Number one was loss of home, which involved not just physical loss of home, but emotional as well as cultural. Identity disruption, children struggle with self-definition and belonging. Third thing that cultural alienation, that is they often face a marginalization in host communities. And the fourth one was resilience and agency. Despite everything, many children find unique ways to adapt, cope, and rebuild. The findings of the study were threefold, and number one was children are depicted as innocent victims. They appear as powerless sufferers caught in conflict, highlighting the emotional toll of geopolitical issues. Second finding was trauma of losing home shapes evolving identity. Their identities become layered, loss, longing, and the complex task of adapting to new worlds. Number third finding was narratives capture both vulnerability and suffering. Despite being emotionally fragile, these children show quite resilience through imagination, bonding, and survival. And here I would like to conclude that these narratives do more than inform. They humanize, shift the lens from numbers to nuanced stories, challenging simplistic portrayals. Importantly, they lay the foundation for more emotionally sensitive policies and interventions for displaced children. And here I would like to end with a quote, and that home is not always a place, it is often a memory, a feeling, a search. So these stories are not just about displacement, they are about the struggle for identity, the resilience of young lives, and the longing to belong. Thank you. I would like to stop here. Thank you for listening to my presentation with patience, and thank you for giving me time. Thank you so much.
Oh, you did make a taste of patience because this was a very great presentation, but then we kind of understood some of the thoughts, some of the the kind of emphasis that was there on issues like identity, disruption, cultural alienation, and loss of home in the real and metaphoric sense. And we would have loved to listen to some more of it. That's it. But then we have come to the end of the session. It was nice listening to some of your presentations. Some were really very good. I'm not to name them, but then it was quite an enriching one on my part as well. Thank you. I don't really have time to go on into any kind of exchange, critical exchange. But then I would love to ask a root form of one thing. It's not a question, just I just wanted to know his take on the vulnerable middle class, the culture, society, middle class society, and their part in this kind of situation where the political censorship constantly takes place, and that they're shifting lanes of what exactly do they think in a situation like that? Do you consider them the victim of the repressive system, or I mean the ideological system, for instance, that has been talked about, or are they product of this particular view, which is like that? But I don't know whether they're able to share his views.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll get. My take on it personally would be to first identify that there is a huge gap between the actual drug population and the amount that it seems to represent. The population is very marginalized, but it actually controls about 95% of the output, both cultural and also political output of that Bengal. So nowadays, political distribution that they are facing in both the powers, the prominent powers that are fighting for the first vote, they belong mostly allegiance in the subaltern. They're not speaking much about the Bengali people, although a part of action of them does align with certain policies. Either the traditional element or some of the social aspect that the upheaval of the vote and other stuff has happened. But they are not. Yes, very and it's very unclear at this point. Probably this happened for the first time. That it is very unclear where they vote for. What is actual dimension that they are looking for? What is that? Different concerns and all that. Yes. But also the political acceleration and also economic acceleration. That what kind of economy in this current world, in the current fiscal, that we are experiencing a lot of especially towards north, where does it look forward with something. It's going to be very interesting to see. Anyway, thank you. It was very nice speech for me, just to clinch it briefly. Okay, so we call it day, and thank you once more for joining the session, everyone. Thank you for listening for us as well.
Thank you so much, sir.